Join me today in Genesis chapter 39. Find that, Genesis 39. We're going to take a walk through there together today before we eat together. So the power of any story is found in the unexpected. Like what makes a great story great, I'm going to roll up my sleeves into the sermon today. What makes a great sermon great, a great story great, is the power of the unexpected that shows up. So, back in the 1960s, there was a golfer by the name of Arnold Palmer. You've probably heard of him. He's quite famous. And the country of Saudi Arabia decided that it was going to build a bunch of really good golf courses and invite rich tourists from around the world to come and golf their golf courses. So Saudi Arabia builds these golf courses. They invite Arnold Palmer to come to do a series of exhibition matches to kind of put it in the media, put it on the world's watch and stuff. And Palmer comes and he had a great time and did a great job and stuff. And when it was done, the Saudi king asked to meet with Arnold Palmer. So Arnold Palmer came into his, royal presence, and the king thanked him very much for coming and how well it had gone and said, thank you for getting us, on the front pages of papers around the world. And because you've done such a great job for us, I'd like to give you a gift. And Arnold Palmer, who probably has a lot of gifts and didn't want to haul one all the way back to the States, politely declined on a gift from the king, the Saudi king. Somebody slipped up and whispered in his ear, like, when a king in the Middle East offers you something, you don't say no, type of deal. So he kind of reversed his course and said, Your Highness, I'd love to have a gift from you. I'd love to have something from you to remind me of this time. And the king said, what would you like? And so he thought, what would I like that would remind me? He thought about a golf club. And he said, hey, if these guys give me a golf club, easy to take home, and that would remind me of his place. So he said, I'd love to have a golf club. The king said yes. The next day, delivered to Arnold Palmer's hotel room, was the title to a golf club. Like greens and tees and clubhouse, the whole 9 yards. Now, the power of that story, beyond the fact that it was fun, is the unexpected, right? Or how about this one? You live in the north. It's funny. We're watching on worship. We're watching the snow come down as we're watching the snow come down. How about this one? Join me if you know it. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen strange sights, but the queerest they ever did see was the night on the marge of Lake LaBarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Oh, suddenly you're interested in poetry by Robert Frost. They cremated him? Now that is pretty cool. Or the third one that I often tell is, I'm a pretty normal guy, look pretty normal. When I knew Rich and Carrie, I was like 23, 24 years old. But 5 years before that, heading out on a Friday night on a youth group trip away from the city of Regina, driving my dad's car with three of my friends with me on a single-lane highway, hit black ice and slid across the ice head-on with a semi-trailer truck at 65 miles an hour. Everyone died. I was the driver. I was 18. I just about was to graduate from high school. I had the world by the tail. Changed my life. Good and bad. It got quiet in here, didn't it? It's the power of the unexpected. So we have a story today in the scriptures that helps us to look at this. And when you look at this story, and some of you know it, it'll be a story about a lot of things. It's got temptation, it's got pain, it's got brokenness in the life of a family, it's got shattered dreams and hopes, it's got loneliness. The list could go on and on. But the 39th chapter of the book of Genesis is our opportunity to learn something that I think is key today, that you'll walk out of here today, and I can't wait to teach it. So this stuff is so crucial because when you walk out those doors later this afternoon, I want you to know three things that all have to do with a word that we use all the time. Matter of fact, we use it so often, I have stopped ending my emails by using it. And it's the word bless or blessing. Christians talk about bless a lot. Now, we can break this chapter down into three parts, each of which teaches us something about the word bless for us. So look at verses 1 through 4. And let's talk about the first word. The first word is the word blessed. These are all derivatives of bless. So verses 1 through 4 say this. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. So just kind of a little bit of something here you just got to understand. Joseph is part of the family of Jacob. He's one of his 12 sons. His brothers don't like him. Some of you have heard that story. At one point, his dad favors him and gives him this rainbow-colored coat with all these colors that are super loved by everyone else that sees it, but his brothers are super jealous. And Joseph is basically sold off into slavery to a bunch of traders who are going from Israel down to Egypt. And when he gets there, a leading official, be like who's the vice prime minister? What do we call him? The executive guy? What's that guy in Canada? It's like he bought Joseph from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down and traded him there. And we read this in verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. And when his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Now, this is a weird question, but I'm talking about blessing, and I'm reading a story in which it would be apparent at the beginning that the idea of blessing is entirely not a part of the story, right? So the key question that I want to ask is God's blessing upon Joseph in this story? Think for a minute what the word bless means. It's a popular word in our world. Pastors pronounce blessings on couples at weddings. Our services end with a blessing on those who attend. We listen to soloists on television at a baseball game singing God Bless America, south of the 49th parallel in the 7th inning stretch. We ask someone if we have their blessing to do something, and we actually meet people that we in our heads think, oh my gosh, God has blessed that person, that guy or that gal, because of all of the money they have, material blessing that they actually have. And for many of us, the idea of blessing that we carry in our mind is all about the big dollar sign, right? That is what blessing is. For many of us, the way we define God's blessing is something to do with getting the right job at the right pace so you can buy the right house in the right neighborhood and drive the right car, take the right vacations, hang with the right number of people. And in the end, when you're 50, 55, 60, it's getting later and later these days. If God truly blesses you, you can retire from it all and play golf every day. And therein is our problem. Thinking from a purely biblical point of view, embracing God's viewpoint, our definition of what it means to be blessed by God needs radical redefinition. Genesis 12 has an amazing amount to do with the video that we just watched. Because in Genesis chapter 12, at the very beginning, God places his blessing upon a particular individual named Abraham, who has a family that becomes a nation that eventually is really the roots of what we call the people of God today. It says, the Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And catch this, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So with that, God begins to bless his people. And if you my brother is an Old Testament professor at McMaster University. He life of Israel, of Abraham, and then Israel, the Jews throughout the Old Testament. That blessing is seen in three ways. Number one, God gives to them a land, a place that would become home where you can belong and you can live in obedience to God. He gives them seed, children, blesses them with kids. And then thirdly, protection. God would, as you read the Old Testament, God would save his people over and over again. So land, seed, and protection. And that's what the story of the Old Testament is. But there was one critical component of all of this, that as you walk through the Old Testament, you see God giving them land, seed, and protection. God also says one other thing. He promises them that he will be present with them. That my presence will be a part of your life living under my reign. Genesis chapter 15, God says to Abraham, I will be with you and not leave you. Genesis 26, and Isaac his son, he tells him, I will be with you. My presence will accompany you. Genesis 28, and his son, Jacob, same thing. Exodus 3, and Moses. Joshua 1, and Joshua. David in 2 Samuel 7. Jeremiah in Jeremiah 1. The disciples in the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28. And lo, I am with you always. And the blessing that God speaks of, the purest distillation of what it means to be blessed by God is to experience his presence. That God is with you, no matter what takes place. My friend, Pat Jackson, sits today in one of the hospitals in Calgary with a kidney stone. Yesterday was the worst day of his life. They finally got him drugged up enough that he's not feeling intense pain, but God's with him, right? He's with him. Some of you shared one of the things I love about our churches is when we do prayer and share. Oh my gosh, I just love it. And we identify those moments when God, so Doug, I affirm you, dude, that you see that God is in this. It doesn't have to be your way to be that he's with you. He walks with you in all of this stuff. And in the end, it's interesting as you go through the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 1 tells about creation, as does 2, which echoes it. Chapter 3, there's this distance. Adam and Eve distance themselves from God, and he judges them because of that and punishes them. And then the rest of the story of the Old Testament and into the New Testament is the story of the recovery of the presence of God in the lives of his people. And where do we find ourselves? In the end of the book of the Revelation, there's this beautiful, amazing picture in Revelation chapter 4 and 5 where life is filled with God's presence. Undeniably, inseparably, we know he is with us all the time. There's never any doubt. That's what it means to be blessed by God. Now, I find great affinity with the words of the author Douglas Copeland in his book called Life After God. After describing what his life has become in a season when he rejected God, a season he describes as entering into a life that is not what he expected it might have been when he was younger, he writes these words. Maybe you yourself deal with this issue better than me. Maybe you have been lucky enough to never have inner voices question you about your own path, or maybe you answered the questioning and came out on the other side beautifully. I don't feel sorry for myself in any way. I am merely coming to grips with what I know the world is truly like. So catch this. This is someone grappling with, is God real? Does God really exist? Is God really with me? He writes this. Now here's my secret. I tell it to you with all the openness of heart that I doubt I shall ever achieve again. So I pray that you are in a quiet room as you hear these words. My secret is that I need God, that I am sick and I can no longer make it alone. I need God to help me give because I no longer seem capable of giving, to help me be kind as I'm no longer capable of kindness, to help me love as I seem beyond being able to love. This is what I want you to know. To be blessed by God is to know his presence no matter your life circumstances. So that's the first thing. Blessed. Now, go back with me to your Bibles. Look at Genesis. Actually, let me read Genesis 12, 1 through 3 again. It said, the Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, your father's household. Go to the land I will show you. I'll make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I'll make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now notice something. God blesses Abraham for blessing's sake. Because he's been blessed by God, he's called to be a blessing. And that's the second word. Move from blessed to blessing now. Let's talk about that word. Abraham would miraculously begin a family as a 100-year-old father with a 90-year-old wife, and that family would become a clan with 12 sons, and then 12 tribes, and then millions and millions of people who were designed from the very beginning and from the very birth of a first child, not only to be a blessing, but to be blessed, but to be a blessing to other people. Back to Joseph. He's part of the fourth generation. There's Abraham, then there's Isaac, then there's Jacob, and there's Joseph and his brothers, okay? He is not only designed to experience the blessing of the presence of God in his life, but he's designed to be a blessing to other people. Now look at verses 5 and 6 here in Genesis chapter 39. We read this. From the time that Potiphar put Joseph in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except for the food that he ate. Now, from Abraham to Joseph to you and me, you are part, as we referred to earlier, of a global redemptive community designed to have an impact on a lost world. There is a flow designed from your life from the inside out. If I were to draw it on a diagram, our lives don't flow like this. They don't become more and more narrow and closer together. Our lives actually are designed to start and they move outward. Our lives are designed to move outward, in a circle outward. And you can live it out in a number of ways. Like when you take a meal to someone who's sick. When you take time, as I tried to this morning driving out, there's that little gas station as soon as you get on Highway 37, and I needed some fishermen's friends. And I go in, there's a guy that clearly got to work early, shoveled all the snow and stuff. When you stop and take a minute and talk to him and end with, have a really great day, that's being a blessing to somebody. Sometimes it's huge, sometimes it's little. God made you to do that. And let me highlight what it means to be the primary means by which we do this blessing as his followers. One of them is the way that we use our tongues. Now in the Bible, the tongue is portrayed as having all kinds of power. With it, we do things that bless and we do things that curse. When you become a follower of Jesus and belong to him, like everything else in our lives, our tongues belong to him. He intends to change the tongue into becoming a thing of beauty. So he reforms the tongue and he changes it to reflect his beauty. He makes it an instrument of blessing rather than an instrument of cursing. He makes it capable of giving worship to God, of helping others instead of beating them down. Summary verse might be Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, that actually says this in 4 different ways. Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up, according to their needs, so it may benefit those who listen. That's how we're supposed to use our tongues. Okay, now I have the spiritual gift of sarcasm. I am very, very good at it, but I have to be very careful about that because sarcasm isn't often a blessing to others. When it really cracks people up and makes them laugh, it's beautiful. A well-timed sarcastic word is of the Lord. But the vast majority of the time, we need to be focused on use days. But he wrote a book once, and a biography of his life, autobiography, called Moving from East to West. And it was his movement from growing up in India, coming to Canada, going to school, et cetera, becoming who he became. As I read the book, when I read it, it was just like this clearly, the subtitle of this book should have been something about seeking his father's blessing. Ravi spent his entire life till he was like 40, seeking the blessing of his father, to hear the words of blessing that just never came from his dad until later in his life. A more practical example. Jamie and I raised 5 girls. All of our girls played soccer. We lived in Oregon for 15 years, and they did the vast majority of their soccer playing there. You know, soccer there is like hockey here. And my kids did a lot of playing that. And along the way, we had our youngest was on a team that was just terrible. Like, they were really bad. You know the whole thing about it doesn't matter if you win or lose. Well, first of all, it actually does. But number 2, they just had terrible coaches. So here are these kids. They're in like grade 4 and 5, and they just lose every game of the year and stuff. Grade 6, things got a little bit on track, but not much. At the end of the grade 6 year, their coach quit, and my wife came up with an idea. Tom from the high school team would be phenomenal with these girls. We should ask him to coach our girls. So Tom Jager became our girls' soccer coach. And when they were in grade 6, they improved. Like, they won like half their games. We were like, yes, our children actually have some athletic ability and can work together. We got to the next year, and they won like most of their games. So it came to grade 8. And in grade 8, an interesting thing happens in club soccer where After grade 8, you can't have the same high school coach and club coach. So your 9 months a year coach soccer can't be the same person, because there's all this stuff about, coaches talking kids into coming to their high schools to play and all that stuff. It's really about basketball in the States, but not soccer. But they have this rule. So basically, this is going to be the big year because Tom's a high school coach. He can't coach these kids again. So grade 8 is a big year. It's big. And he is just painting this picture all year. We're going to win the state title. You kids are so good. We're going to win the state title. And he has all this stuff that he works through with them as they go through the year. And we get to the end of the grade 8 year. They won state. Like our kids won state. These kids that were non-athletic in grade 5 they won state. So year ends, we throw this party at somebody's big house, have this big fried chicken party. And this is what happens to pastors. John can tell you this is the case. I walk in the door for the party, and 3 parents come up to me and say, hey man, we got to have like a little program tonight. We want to honor Tom with some stuff, and we want you to lead it. Like, would you lead the program and make it happen? I'm like maybe a phone call like yesterday. And the other one is, could you pray? And it's always pray, but use God. Don't use Jesus. Like, that offends people, type of deal. So I'm like, sure, I'll take it on. We do it. So you got a picture. We're in this big Montana, this family moved from Montana to Oregon, built this huge log cabin. We're all here. There's 20 kids right here. Then all the parents are standing in the back. I'm standing up here. I call Tom up. We give him a portrait of the girls in the goal. We gave him, a bunch of money and a trip to the coast to go to a hotel with his wife. And then it comes, I said, we're going to add something to the program tonight. And we're going to, and I'd just been preaching on this. I said, we're going to do a time of blessing for Tom tonight. And Tom is like a really committed, through his whole life, Catholic. So I knew he knew what I was kind of talking about when I do that. But I called Tom up here, and a couple of the girls stumble into saying something because they make an attempt. And then I invited the parents. There's I don't know, 30 parents there. I invited them to share and stuff, and they begin to share, and they begin to talk about, you love my kid way beyond soccer. You cared about the development of them as a person. You always worked with them to just become better people. You worked on relationship stuff. You've been a phenomenal coach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just went on and on. 2 of the guys who shared broke down why they shared, which tells you it was a very special. And Tom's sitting here, and I'm watching him, and he's just taking this in. It's just blowing him away how these people share what he means to them. They're just hugely blessing him with their words. Okay? Thing ends. I go home. Didn't have my cell with me, but by the time I basically drive up the hill to our house, that was a subtle way of saying I'm richer than Tom. But it isn't. It actually isn't. It isn't. But it just struck me that it could sound like that. I drove up to our poor home, and by the time I walked into our kitchen, my phone is sitting on the counter, and there's a voicemail from Tom. And here's what Tom says. Tom says, Matt, I slipped out of the room to call you and leave a voicemail. I've never in my entire life experienced anything like that. And I grew up in a really good family with a great dad. That was unbelievable, my experience. And he called me the next day to thank me again. The power of words to bless other people has an amazing impact on our gospel's ability to penetrate a life. It is an amazing thing. We need to lose sarcasm, cutting criticism, competition, anger, impatience, and we need God to ask us to put those things off and in His place, pick up blessing and use it as a tool for the gospel, a way of loving other people. Write a letter today. Make a phone call. Write an email. Send a text. Send a fax. Write an encouragement card. Go see someone in person. But bless those in your life that God brings to your mind, even right now, because that's how Holy Spirit does His work. So, you were blessed to be a blessing. Now, there's one more word here. Oh. Am I gone? Am I beeping?
We're close.
Here we are.
Sorry.
That's okay. So the last word, I want you to look down, and it starts in verse 6, and it actually runs through the rest of the chapter. It is on here. There we go. Up. So, we there's a story that's told from the end of verse 6 through the end of the chapter. It's the story of what took place here. And the third word that I want to use flows out of these verses. And we've talked about blessed. We've talked about blessing. Let's talk about blessable. I don't even know if it's a word, but anyway, Genesis 39:6 through the end of the chapter tells the story of a guy who is a bit of a stud. I don't know. Picture Brad Pitt. Who's younger than Brad Pitt these days, who's just a stud muffin, who is pursued by a married woman who wants to conquer him in bed. She tries, he says no. She tries, he says no. She tries, he says no and no and no, until the place where she grabs him and he abandons all sense of decorum, all sense of dignity, and he just runs off. And as he leaves, she is left with a piece of his clothing, which she has grabbed, and she finally realizes that nothing will ever come of her attempted tryst with him. So she flips, and she accuses him dishonestly of wrong, using the article of clothing as evidence against him, and he gets tossed in prison, etc., etc., etc. It's just a bad, what's the bad, horrible, not very good day, all that stuff. He has that kind of a day. And it does appear that this chapter was written to warn us about temptation. And there are things that we can talk about related to that. I could give you a lesson on how to defeat sexual temptation right now. Be clearly convinced that something is wrong. Refuse and say, I will not participate in this. Rationalize and state the reason for making the right choice like Joseph did. He says specifically, I did not do that because it would wrong God and it would wrong Potiphar. Leave no room for debate. Be consistent. Make the same choices again and again. Do everything you can to avoid a compromising situation. If you have to, abandon your dignity and flee and experience true freedom. Okay? True freedom. Now, there's your primer on conquering temptation. It's all in there. Those are the things that he did. But personally, I don't think this is what the end of the chapter is about. I think the end of the chapter is about the word blessable. And let me define that. It's about keeping yourself in a place where God can continue to bless you with his full presence. It's about keeping him on the throne of your life, about guarding your heart as the wellspring of life where God dwells. Blessable means to keep in step with God and to surrender to him. And I well know that you are not perfect people, because I well know that I am not a perfect person. We're all human. That's why 1 John chapter 2, verse 1 and 2 says, John writes, when we sin, we have a mediator in heaven who intercedes on our behalf before the throne of the Father. But to be blessable is to keep your heart in step with God. Now, this is interesting because this is not a popular idea. The idea of blessability, type it into your word processor sometime, and what will happen is you'll have a little red that appears underneath. What does that mean? It means that word doesn't exist, right? Like something's misspelled because that's not a real word. Our world doesn't believe in the idea of blessability, keeping ourselves blessed by God. But we believe in that. For Joseph, he remained blessable and he was blessed by God's presence even in prison. Verse 20 tells us that. While Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him and showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. But he remained blessable by honoring and obeying God and walking with him. For you, it may have something to do with resisting sexual temptation, but it'll often mean something beyond that. It'll be something else. Worshiping money, making an idol of having to have a certain number of possessions or a lifestyle, having to say no and defeat bitterness and anger and the stuff that just comes up inside of us in relationship with someone who has wronged us. In each of our lives, there are these constant coups d'etats going on in our lives where we want to dethrone God. The enemy wants us to dethrone God. Our sinful nature wants us to dethrone God and put ourselves on the throne of our lives. And you have to defeat them. You have to say no. You have to say, God, help me in those situations to walk in obedience to you because I know what is right. And I want to just remind you today, you need to guard your blessability because you are blessed. And you're blessed to be a blessing. But you will not be continuing to be blessed and be a blessing if you don't guard your blessability. Now, Some of you know the words to what may be the most memorized verses in Scripture. John 3:16 might be number one, but Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is probably the next one. Say it with me if you know it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and in all your ways acknowledge him. Is that how it actually goes? No. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. So really simple. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. Now, a bit of a right-hand turn, but how many of you remember Seinfeld episode 152? Okay. Oh, you know it. You just don't know that you know it. It's the yada, yada, yada episode. Do you know what the word yada means in Yiddish, in Hebrew? It means to know. Okay? I know. So Jerry says to Elaine, I went to the store, I bought a loaf of bread and some milk and stuff, and yada, yada, yada. And they do that all throughout the show, right? Well, think about this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, yada him. Know him. Acknowledge him. Invite him into every pathway of your life. In all your ways, acknowledge him, yada him, and he will direct your path. Essentially, what Jerry and George and Elaine is saying when they say, I know, is the same thing we say. I know God in this area of my life. And I know God in this area of my life. And I know and acknowledge God in this area of my life. And that's what God has asked us to do. And by doing that, we continue to be blessed. We are able to be a blessing to other people as we guard our blessability. Thus endeth the. Thank you for these words, these verses today, and this story that comes from Joseph's life. Super practical. A person who experienced great pain continues to be used by you in a land where he knows nobody. No one knows his favorite foods, when his birthday is, the songs he loves, the family he belongs to, and yet he walks with you, and because of it, we are here today. He is the reason that the people of Israel were able to thrive and become who they became so that we could become who we become as the people of God. Help us, Lord, to be blessed today, to be a blessing. Help us to guard our blessability. In your name we pray. Amen.